In his State of the Union address on February 21, Putin, who was obviously full of resentment and anger, announced on the spot Russia's suspension of participation in the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty New START, which also means that the original nuclear disarmament system is in disintegration. You must know that the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty is the last remaining nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia, signed in Prague in 2010 and entered into force in 2011. According to the treaty, the number of Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles will be limited to 700, and the number of nuclear warheads will be limited to 550. Both parties are allowed to check on each other last year. Putin and Biden also agreed to extend the treaty until 2026. A year has passed. The situation has changed drastically, and Russia is about to withdraw from the Group Y. Putin's version is that in February, NATO issued a statement demanding that Russia comply with New START, including allowing them to inspect Russia's nuclear facilities. I don't even know what to call it. A ridiculous drama. Putin said, "We know that the West is directly involved in the attack on our strategic air base. Drones used to this day were modernized with the help of NATO experts. Now they want to inspect our defense facilities." Which sounds like some kind of crap in the context of today's confrontation. He also said that there is no need to lie to everyone and portray himself as an advocate of peace and detente. We know all the details, such as the expiry date of certain types of munitions in the United States. And in this regard, we're very aware that some in Washington are already considering natural experiments in nuclear weapons, including the development of new types of nuclear weapons. So, according to Putin, I have to announce today that Russia will suspend its participation in the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. I repeat, Russia is not withdrawing from the treaty, but suspending its participation. At the same time, if the United States conducts a nuclear test, the Russian Ministry of Defense must also be prepared to conduct a nuclear test. There was no threat of Russia using nuclear weapons, and the emphasis was placed on merely suspending participation. But it was still a breather, because once this treaty is abandoned and the world nuclear disarmament framework is completely disintegrated, what will happen next? US-Russia nuclear confrontation. Conduct new nuclear tests. Then, really use nuclear weapons. Don't forget that a nuclear war cannot be fought or won. And if it really happens, it will be a disaster for all mankind. I took a look. Anyway, on the morning of February 22, Beijing time, World War III became a hot word on American social media, but who is to blame? After all, it is the United States that is most famous for withdrawing from groups and withdrawing from addiction. Anyway, in the past few years, everyone knows that the United States withdrew from the TPP, leaving Japan and other small partners standing dumbfounded. The United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement, which made Europe angry and scolded Trump for disregarding the lives of future generations. The United States withdrew from UNESCO. And this method of paying $500 million in debt is really absurd. The United States has withdrawn from the UN Human Rights Council, and the country that pays the most attention to human rights does not want to mention human rights. The United States withdrew from the Universal Postal Union on the grounds that the discounted postage was cheaper for Chinese Taobao sellers. With the U.S. withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, this old conundrum is getting harder. The United States withdrew from the World Health Organization, regardless of whether the epidemic is an epidemic or not. And the dead are not dead. The United States has withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. The United States does not want to be restricted. The INF Treaty was signed by the United States and the Soviet Union in 1987. It stipulates that the two countries will no longer produce or test land-based cruise missiles and ballistic missiles with a range of 500 kilometers to 500 kilometers. Said at the time, I think Russia and the US are on equal footing if some countries don't like the INF Treaty and choose to withdraw, such as our US allies. We will take immediate measures. I want to stress here that our response will be prompt and reciprocal. And if our allies withdraw from the INF Treaty, we will follow suit. In a word, the United States withdraws, and Russia also withdraws now. On the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, Russia is simply one step ahead. I am going to withdraw from the group. What does the United States think? U.S. Secretary of State Blinken immediately stated that Russia's decision was disappointing and irresponsible. The United States will pay close attention to Russia's follow-up actions and is still ready to negotiate with Russia on arms control issues at any time. Can everything go back? I don't know. Putin seems to have left a hole, but such a major issue has become a bargaining chip for both sides, which is really an ominous sign after all. It is related to war and peace, and even the survival of all mankind, but the war is still going on. In his State of the Union address, Putin also made it clear that it is impossible to defeat Russia on the battlefield. It was the West that launched the war, and Russia is using force to stop the war, believe it or not. Putin said so anyway. Alas, finally. What do you think? Simple 3 points. First, Putin is clenching his teeth. The original blitzkrieg has now become a protracted war, a positional war, and a war of attrition. The Ukrainian army seems to be getting stronger as the war progresses, and the West has made it clear that it wants to defeat Russia. What are the consequences of defeat? Putin is also unimaginable. Therefore, this State of the Union address is full of anger and gunpowder, and it is said that Putin wrote it himself. Second, Russia is also retreating now that you've reached this point. Don't blame me for being rude. I want to quit the group. To the international nuclear disarmament system is in jeopardy. What's next? I just feel vaguely uneasy if we continue to fight like this and get addicted to withdrawing from the group like this. It may be a disaster for the United States, Russia, and the whole world. Nuclear bombs are no joke. Third, let's say something aside. In war, the most pitiful people are really the common people. Ukrainian people are like this. What about Russia? In Putin's view, the purpose of Western sanctions against Russia is to make the Russian people suffer. There is another very interesting paragraph. Putin said in his State of the Union address, "Believe me, no ordinary Russian has pity on those who have lost assets in Western banks, nor those who have lost yachts and mansions abroad. Why?" In Putin's words, these people transferred their property out of Russia, thinking that they could live a satisfactory life in the West. But they were looted by the West in the end. There are indeed many things, and I believe they have subverted the cognition of many people. After the Russian-Ukrainian conflict broke out, we also saw that what sports knows no borders, what science knows no borders, what contract spirit, what private property is sacrosanct, all are not counted. The West has frozen hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian overseas assets, and the overseas mansions, teams, yachts, etc. Some Russian tycoons have also been frozen or even auctioned off. Poor. They have suffered heavy losses in the West, and have not received any sympathy in Russia, and are still being ridiculed by Putin.